Ok. Ora, muito boa tarde a todos, muito bem-vindos. Hoje temos a conferência da professora Renáta Přichystalová. I hope I did it something near your name. And ela é professora na Universidade de Masaryk, em Brno, na República Checa, e é especializada e tem trabalhado durante toda a sua carreira em contextos da Alta Idade Média, particularmente da região da Morávia, e particularmente também em contextos de práticas, contextos funerários, de práticas funerárias, particularmente também muito ligado com as questões relacionadas com as sociedades, a mobilidade de pessoas e também a estrutura social das sociedades automedievais. Welcome, Professor Renáta Přichystalová from the Masaryk University in Brno, in the Czech Republic. Many thanks to be with us. She is a specialist in early medieval Europe, in early medieval context, and particularly in burial contexts. And she's very keen in working with mobility of people, social structures, and social structures in the early medieval ages, particularly in the region of Moravia. She was with us in Nova some weeks ago, more or less 2 months ago, in Erasmus. It was a pleasure to meet her, so we invited her to give us this lecture. And the floor is yours. Many thanks to be with us, and we hope that everyone enjoyed it. And at the end, we have certainly some questions and a debate to do. But thank you very much, and thank you, everyone. So the floor is yours, Renáta. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, thank you very much for inviting me to share with you the findings of my research on burial ritual in the 9th century in Central Europe. I really appreciate it. I would like you to introduce in basic frames with the burial behavior in Great Moravia Empire, which is dated from 9th to beginning of 10th century. I will be focusing on the organization of funerary areas and character of burial practices at Pohansko near Breclav, based on the comparison on the cemetery around the second church at northeastern suburb of the stronghold, and the dispersal settlement burial grounds, the stronghold's southern suburb. I would like to introduce the outline of my lecture. First, I will very briefly draft the development of the burial rite in our territory in the period from the end of the 6th century to the 10th century AD. Then I will tell you some basic information about the Pohansko as an archaeological site, and also about the types of burial grounds that were discovered here during the archaeological research, which began here in 1958. Then I will move on to the main topic of my lecture, and based on selected characteristics, I will explain the differences between the specific types of burial grounds in Pohansko. In conclusion, I will try to summarize everything in a logical way. So, for early Slavic periods, which is dated from the end of 6th century and to the end of 8th century, is characteristic a cremation burial rite with flat burial grounds, with graves with or without an urn. During the second half of the 7th century, burial mounds appeared in our territory, but the weight of the burial remained the same. It is a cremation burial rite. During the second half of 8th century, an inhumation burial ritual begins to appear, probably as a common influence of both Christianity and the burial ritual of the Avaric nomads. Burial mounds as a type of burial ground continue. Burials of unburied bodies are becoming much more common in the mounds at that time. So in the in the second half of 8th century. Sometime in the end of 8th century, the era of so-called rural raw burial ground begins. Here only the inhumation as a burial rite was used. In the first half of the 9th century, fortified central settlements began to be built. The first Christian missions arrived, churches were built, and around them, the first church cemeteries in our territory were established. And in the 9th century, we have also archaeological evidence about burial activities in the frame of settlements. Here on this slide, you can see an example of cremation burial. As I said, this burial behavior is characteristic for early Slavic period. The graves usually contain a vessel, an urn, in which the remains of cremated human bones were kept. Archaeologically documented graves without an urn have also been found, where the ashes were placed without a ceramic container. These are so-called cremation pit graves. The burnt bones could be placed into the bag or box made by an organic material. The box or bag could be totally decomposed over the time and left no archaeological traces. The grave inventory from these burials is very poor. We find out here metal artifacts as an iron knife, belt buckles, jewel made by bronze or copper wire, arrowheads, bone and antler artifacts as combs, for instance, then glass beads or ceramic or stone spindle whorls, etc. The grave inventory tends to be damaged by fire, so it means that the furnishing of the deceased person was burned together with corpse. In the South Moravia was uncovered the largest early medieval cremation burial ground in the Central Europe. It was placed nearby today's village, Přítluky. There was found out 436 cremation graves. Unfortunately, to this day, this burial site has not been properly processed and published. During the second half of the 7th century, burial mounds began to appear in our territory. Burial by burning remained, but in addition to flat burial sites, barrows began to be used. In the end of 8th century appeared the inhumation burial rite. People started to bury unburned bodies of their deceased. Burial mounds with inhumation continue until the beginning of the 10th century. The number of barrows in burial grounds range from few to close to 100. A barrow diameter could measure from 3 meters to 15 meters. Mound height could be from a few tenths of centimeters to 2 meters, but usually the diameter of mound is 5 meters, and its height it's between 90 and 130 centimeters. Barrows are usually arranged in rows or in clusters in the burial grounds. Sometimes there is a wooden structure inside the barrow, a stone ring around the mound, or a stone surface of a barrow. So there is a mound is covered with a layer of stone. However, but more common, it is usually a simple mound of earth. On this slide, you can see an attempt to reconstruct the shape of the burial mound of Kozlí near Orlík in South Bohemia. This burial mound ground was very precisely excavated by Michal Lutovský from Prague in the 90s of 20th century, and the outputs of this research were full published in 1996. Sometime in the end of 8th century appeared in our region, in our territory, so-called long-lasting rural flat row burial grounds. Many of them are dated from the end of 8th century to the first half of 11th century. They were placed in the early medieval countryside. It means outside the central fortified settlements, not in their immediate surroundings. This type of burial ground could include very various number of graves, from tens to hundreds to thousands. Only unburned bodies were buried here, so we talk about an inhumation burial rite. These burial grounds very probably served as the central community burial grounds with a strong tradition. They were probably used by several communities from the region. The grave inventory is also very various. In the burial ground could be found out graves with no furnishing, graves with average equipment, but also the graves with weapons and equestrian equipment, which mark presence of graves of members of the military elite. Graves referring to both pagan and Christian burial traditions. This slide is presented an example of this so-called long-lasting rural flat row burial grounds. Here is depicted the plan of burial ground in today's village Dolní Věstonice, location na Pískách. This burial ground is situated around 25 kilometers northwest of Pohansko. Here was uncovered more than 1,600 graves, and this burial ground was full published by Šimon Ungerman 2 years ago. And here you can very briefly see the variability of grave inventory from so-called long-lasting rural flat row burial grounds. Very often we can find out in the graves ceramic pots, glass beads, glass globular buttons, jewelry made by copper or bronze wire, spurs or axes, or bell sets, etc. After this briefly introduction of the issue of early medieval burial rites in the Central Europe, we can finally move on. So let's go to the Great Moravia Empire and let's go to Pohansko. Pohansko was a part of Great Moravian central settlements. Great Moravia was a power geopolitical formation we can, I think, consider as an early medieval state, or maybe better would be to use the term dominion. The Great Moravian rulers came from Moimirids dynasty. The Great Moravian Empire have existed in the 9th century up to the beginning of 10th century AD. The empire core was situated in today southern Moravia and Soviet Slovakia. During the reign of the ruler Svetopluk, it was between 870 to 894, where under the control of the Moimirids dynasty also today's Bohemia, whole Slovakia, the northern part of Austria, Lesser Poland, Silesia, and perhaps part of Saxony. On this map, you can see the important Great Moravian archaeological sites, as were Staré Město, Mikulčice, or Pohansko. They are not listed in historical written sources under today's name. Maybe that Staré Město is famous mythical Veligrad, or Mikulčice could be an Urbs Antiqua Rastici. It means Rastislav's old town. We don't know it exactly, and maybe we will never know it. Sites in today southwestern Slovakia as Děvín or Nitra are sites which were listed in historical written sources. We know that Rastislav was one of the Moimirids dynasty ruler. This Rastislav was in 846 besieged in a fenced place called Dovina by Emperor Louis the German. It could be today's medieval castle Děvín, which is situated about the confluence of the Morava and Danube rivers. Today's town Nitra, in written sources called as Nitrava, was the seat of the Duke Pribina, who was in the 30s of the 9th century expelled by the Moravian Duke Mojmír. Pribina, according to written sources, was the first ruler of Slavic origin to build a Christian church on Slavic territory in Nitra. It was in 828. Archbishop Adalram of Salzburg consecrate this church. It's according to the historical written sources. If it's true, who knows? For your better orientation on this map, there is also pictured city Prague and Regensburg. Regensburg is a city in Bavaria on Danube River where the bishopric has resided already from the first half of the 8th century, and this bishopric had very probably a part in the first Christianization missions in today's Bohemia or Moravia. Here is the aerial photo of Pohansko, of the site I am focusing on. After this short introduction about the great Moravian history, we finally get to the site of Pohansko itself. The site is situated about 3 kilometers southern of the town Breclav and about 12 kilometers northern of the confluence of the Morava and Dia rivers. Pohansko is defined as a lowland fortified central agglomeration. The fenced area is 28 hectares, so it's very huge, a stronghold. In the press, was Pohansko mentioned for the first time in the 1892 in the newspaper article about the old monuments of Moravia and Austrian Silesia. In the science press was the site for first time cited by the archaeologist Innocent Ladislav Červinka in 1928 in his book Slavs in Moravia and the Great Moravian Empire. Systematic archaeological research has been taking place here since 1958. The archaeological research is supported by Department of Archaeology and Museology at Masaryk University in Brno. Traces of human activities have been identified at the site since the prehistory, since the Neolithicum and Bronze Age, the Roman Age, or since the migration period, but a substantial part of the archaeological traces were left here in the early Middle Ages. The length of a Pohansko fortification is 2 kilometers. The wooden earthy rampart was about 4 meters high, with a wooden palisade at the top of the rampart, probably reached a fortification height of 6 meters. Rampart of Pohansko is the largest discovered and closed fortification from Great Moravian period. Archaeologically excavated and documented is only one gate. It is so-called Eastern Gate, number 4 on this plan. This gate was located approximately in the middle part of Eastern Rampart. Other 3 gates are discovered only by the geophysical prospection in northern, western, and southern part of Rampart, and it's always in the middle part of Rampart. Inside the rampart was explored the main residential seat of Pohansko nobility, so-called Magnets Manor. It's number 2 on this plan. Southern of the fortified area was explored southern suburb. It's number 9 on this plan. And the second one was discovered northeast of fortification. It's number 1. It's northeastern suburb. In Pohansko were uncovered also 2 Christian churches. First church was found in northwestern part of or in fortified area. Church with graveyard represented a sacred quarter of the so-called manor court. And there is the red cross number 1. The one nave church with half circle apsis was made of stone and surrounded by the cemetery with 407 graves. The cemetery contained a lot of rich graves with weapons, equestrian equipment, and female golden and silver jewels as earrings of Byzantine type made from precious metal. Second church, a rotunda, was discovered in northeastern suburb of Pohansko. This church was made, this construction of this church was very weird, made of stone where only the base of church, wooden walls were plastered by mortar. The construction of apsis wall was made from wattle with mortar daubing. The cemetery around this church will be our subject of interest, as well as the scattered graves discovered in the southern suburb of Pohansko stronghold. So it's position number 9 and number 1 on this plan. As for the funeral behavior, Pohansko is very interesting site. We note 2 basic types of burial grounds. First is the cemetery around the church, and the second are the burial areas identified in the whole central agglomeration. These are the scattered or dispersed burial grounds or small groups of graves inside in the settlement structures situated between settlement features. On this slide, you can see a table with the particular explored location in Pohansko and the number of graves that were there discovered. A total of 559 graves were explored in church cemeteries, cemetery around the first and around the second church. Almost the same number of graves, 485, were uncovered in the frame of scattered burial grounds between the settlement structure. So we follow in my lecture the 152 graves around the rotunda in northeastern suburb and 205 graves from the southern suburb. Before we dive into the grave complexes and burial grounds from the northeastern and southern suburb, I would like to briefly show you the basic data about the cemetery around the first church, which was archaeologically investigated between 1959 and 1963. So far, only a catalog has been published in 1971 by František Kalousek. František Kalousek was head of this excavation at that time. A total of 407 graves were uncovered here in the cemetery around the first church. We have 9 graves which contain gold artifacts, 35 silver artifacts, 35 graves with silver artifacts, 4 graves were equipped with sword, and 33 graves of graves contain spurs. This is the richest necropolis explored within the Breclav-Pohansko settlement agglomeration. Here you can see the plans of the burial grounds that we will be focusing on. On the left side is the plan of the church cemetery around the rotunda, and on the right side are the burial areas discovered during the excavation of the southern suburb. In order to find out what are the differences or connection between the 2 types of burial, it is around the churches and settlement burials. We will focus on 3 elements of funerary or funeral behavior, namely body position, body orientation, and grave furnishing. Body position will be our first focus. The dominant and thus the standard position is the supine body position with the extant extremities. There are sometimes variation in the upper limbs, slight flexing to the body, placing the hands in the abdominal area, in the lap or on the chest. These variations of the placing upper limbs are part of the definition of the basic standard position. Among non-standard body position are counted crouched body on the left or on the right side and prone position. We registered altogether 35 non-standard or irregular body position in Pohansko. It is 3.5% from all discovered graves in Pohansko, and 19 cases are recorded in southern suburb. However, it is still marginal matter within the burial custom in general. So in majority, people was buried in Pohansko in standard position. Here is a graph showing the situation with non-standard graves on both suburbs. The red color represents the southern suburb and the yellow one the northeastern suburb. You can notice for yourself that there are only 2 graves in a non-standard body position in the church cemetery around Rotunda. Of this, in one grave has the skeleton in a special position on the side, probably due to the health condition of this individual at the time of its death. And grave with the individual in strong crouch position is probably a settlement grave. Is not belonging to the church cemetery, but I think it is a part of the settlement burial area. This grave was found under the destruction of a settlement feature, and its location near the church is probably a coincidence. So, in the end, we can say that in the frame of cemetery around the Rotunda, we have no individuals buried by the plan in non-standard position. Here is a plan for the cemetery around the second church with the marked graves with the individuals in non-standard body position. You can see here that a strongly crouched individual was placed outside the originally enclosed cemetery area, and its orientation is also different. The grave is located solitary, and it can't be considered that it belongs more to the settlement burials than to the church cemetery area. Here you can see a plan of the southern suburb with a graphic representation of grave density with the marking of the graves with non-standard body position. These are the red triangles. As you can observe, the graves with non-standard body position are noticed in areas with very low grave density. These are mostly solitary graves. Very likely it means that these individuals had a special social status. Maybe they could be servants or slaves or people who broke the rules, were punished and buried in a dishonorable position. Another important element of the funeral rite is the body orientation. The predominant body orientation in Pohansko is in southwest northeast direction, including west-east orientation, which is standard on majority of early medieval burial grounds in general. More than 80% of the graves is oriented in this way in the church cemeteries. In the dispersed burial grounds, it is about 50%. There is a considerable variability in orientation. There is as well as in body position. The second most used body orientation here is northwest-southeast direction, which is the azimuth of the winter solstice. Maybe this orientation is connected with the pagan religion, but it's just only interpretation. All other orientation were only marginally recorded. Here on this slide is a graph showing the situation with body orientation on both suburbs. The high variability of body orientation on settlements graves is more than significant. It's you can see that the graph, the line of south suburb is like a rainbow. This reflects the high variability in the arrangement of funeral areas within the settlement structures. Here you can see a plan of cemetery around the second church. Almost all graves here except the longitudinal axis of the church. It has the direction southwest, northeast. An exception is the children's graves lining in the half arc of the apse and group of graves north of the church, which is oriented in direction west-east. This grave group is one of the youngest in the cemetery, and according to our knowing about this cemetery and about this church and locality in general, inside in general, this grave groups is dated in the edge of the 9th and 10th century, and maybe in the first decade of the 10th century. So in the first case, the children graves lining the apses, these are graves copying the church wall. And in the second case, the chronological youngest graves applying the standard Christian body orientation with the head to the west. Thus, these are not situations that would not be possible to interpret within the framework of the custom of a church, a Christian church burial. On this slide is pictured plan of the southern suburb. High variability of grave orientation can be clearly seen in section A in the left corner, in section B in the down on lower left corner, and section C in the upper right corner. You can see that the variability of the orientation is very high. Another significant element that we can study when focusing on a funeral rite is the absence or presence of grave furnishing and its quality. It is clear from the table on the slide that graves with grave goods are much more common in church cemeteries, and there is also a higher presence of status artifacts or items made of precious materials. The chronological moment is very important here. Towards the end of the 9th century, the grave furnishing is slowly but surely beginning to disappear, which is related to the growing influence of Christian funeral rituals. For your better idea, I have prepared several slides where you can see the contents of the grave goods in the case of female graves and male graves placed in cemeteries near churches or around the churches, or in the burial grounds in the frame of settlements. Here is an illustration of jewelry from church cemeteries, artifacts made of precious materials as a gold, silver, gilded bronze, and glass. From these materials were produced earrings, pendants, rings, globular-shaped buttons called gombiki, etc. Here is an illustration of jewelry and pottery from the settlement funeral areas. The jewels were made mainly from the bronze or copper, and this kind of jewelry of very simple form is called the jewelry of Danube type. For the settlement's burial grounds is very significant presence of ceramic pots, which we put into the context of the pagan religion. We interpret the pots as containers for food or drink offerings. Unlike the jewelry, the grave furnishing with weapons or equestrian equipment is usually registered in graves from church cemeteries and in cemeteries in the hinterland of strongholds or even in settlement graves. However, it is necessary to mention that these artifacts are more common in the graves of church burial grounds, and also exclusive finds imported from the area of the Frankish Empire appear more often here in the church burial grounds. This applies especially to exclusive belt sets and the occurrence of swords of the so-called Frankish type. If we monitor the quantity and richness of the grave inventory in the church cemeteries and non-church burial grounds, we can trace these three factors. At first, chronological factor. The grave goods began to disappear from graves under the increasing influence of Christian religion on daily life and social principles. And it started from the late of 9th century. Economic social factors is the second one. The graves with richer equipment and with presence of precious metal items or luxury weapons are mostly found in church cemeteries. In dispersed burial ground, we record graves with grave inventory related to the traditional Slavic religion, such as food, grave goods, ceramic pots, protective amulets of various types. And the last one, a religious social factor. We observed great variability of burial customs in the dispersed burial grounds, as body orientation, body position, utilization of the settlement feature as a grave bed, uneven burial area structure. What was the reason for that? Apparently, it reflects the higher heterogeneity of the buried community. There could be buried pagans or Christians, free humans or servants or slaves, local or non-local individuals, etc. Slowly but surely, we are coming to the end of today's lecture. In Pohansko, we record two types of completely differently organized burial grounds. These are church cemeteries and burial grounds scattered between settlement structure. As part of our research, we focus on the church cemetery around Rotunda, on the northeastern suburb, and on the dispersed settlement graves from the southern suburb. How can we interpret these results of our research? So, at Pohansko, we can distinguish two markedly different types of burial practices. Inhumation cemeteries with clearly defined locus sacer and dispersed burial grounds in settlements where the boundary between residential and funerary area cannot be clearly identified. Organization of the area for funerary activities, selection of the burial place, and homogeneity of applied burial rites in the above-mentioned two types of funerary areas were different. In order to find out how extensive these differences is, we chose, which shows several characteristics of funerary areas and compared them with each other. As an example of church cemetery, which shows the cemetery around the Rotunda in the northeastern suburb of Pohansko. The southern suburb of Pohansko provide us with data concerning the funerary areas dispersed in and between settlement structures. In dispersed cemeteries, we can observe a wider variability of burial customs, also regarding the orientation and position of individuals buried in graves. Certain ambivalence of burial rites make us suppose that there was a more variegate religious, social, and maybe also ethnical background. The heterogeneity of buried population and the non-centralized organization of funerary areas are reflected in rules incomprehensible to present-day people, with the help of which the funerary areas have been incorporated into or among the settlement structure. Why the people did it? Why? They buried their deceased behind their houses. This phenomenon is all the more evident in comparison with a clearly defined funerary area of a church cemetery, where the already delimited locus sacer included places with higher or lower social prestige, like church interior, the area south of the church, behind the apse, farther away from the church, etc. Almost all graves adhered to the same orientation towards southwest, northeast orientation or direction, and the position of deceased in graves also was very strictly observed: supine position, extended arms and legs. Burials in a church cemetery must have been organized centrally, which is indicated by a gradual infilling of the space with the effort to increase the density of graves under the lowest possible intrusion of all the burials. When all the graves were intruded, the skeletal remains were reverently reburied nearby the primary burial. And these tendencies, however, cannot be followed up in the southern suburb. Individual cemeteries probably only existed within a very short period of time. This is also proved by the alternating activities in individual parts of the settlement area in southern suburb. For example, here in the part A, in the upper left corner of the large, so for example, in the northwestern part of the large rescue excavation area, we found evidence of alternating funerary, settlement, and again funerary activity within a time interval from about the mid-9th to the late 9th century or to the early 10th century. So between 50 years, the activity shifted from funerary to settlement and again funerary activity. It is therefore likely that the emergence of small dispersed cemeteries depend on the current situation, that is, on the existence of active economic units. The selection of the last resting place for deceased community members probably was done by authorized person, maybe pagan priest or some elders, representative of a family or an economic unit. The question is, how was the attitude of the members of clergy who were entrusted with organization of Christian life at Pohansko towards dispersed cemeteries? From the number of 400 and 85 graves in dispersed cemeteries outside the church areas, we can infer that their attitude was very tolerant. On the basis of the character and quantity of funerary equipment found in graves, it is evident that church cemeteries were reserved for local social elite as well as for their narrow or more distant relatives or servants. The dispersed cemeteries in the area of South Suburb most probably included burials of middle and lower social classes. There are graves with warriors and equestrian equipment and graves with bronze jewelry, necklaces or glass beads. However, most of the graves lack any funerary equipment. Graves with atypical orientation or position of the body mostly contain burials of children, followed by women, and finally men. Among these graves also were children's and female graves with relatively rich funerary equipment, unlike the graves of men. Male individuals buried in crouched position or in atypical orientation were only sporadically equipped with modest grave goods, but their graves mostly did not contain any funerary equipment. These individuals evidently counted among lower classes within the local community. Simple comparison of selected characteristic of burial customs identified in the church cemetery of the northeastern suburb and in dispersed cemeteries from southern suburb of Pohansko demonstrate that burials in the area around churches were most probably organized and planned centrally, and the organization and supervision of funerary activities may have been in the hands of clergy, of Christian clergy. The burials in cemeteries within settlement structures, on the other hand, were organized in accordance with customs of local community. The organization and supervision of these funerary areas, settlement funerary areas, were most probably in the hands of persons approved and authorized by the community, maybe pagan priests, some significant community members, or the council of the elder, etc. Anyway, at the turn between the 9th and 10th centuries, the influence of Christianity and Christian customs on the whole community living not only at Pohansko has increased, and burial rites gradually become homogenized. Obrigado pela atenção.
Muito obrigada a nós, Renata. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And your Portuguese is it's improving. So now we have a part of discussion and questions. I will maybe, although this is very interesting, the photo, how do you put people there and they were okay with that?
It's our students.
Okay, the students, we can do it.
But the person where is the bubble? That's me.
Okay, then you give the example.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe we can. I will ask you to close your sharing, that then we can see each other, and it will be more easier to see people if they want to make some questions. And I have some, but I will give the floor to others first.
Yeah. Normally, we used another software, MS Teams. So Zoom I didn't use very often. So
let me see if I can do it myself.
okay, you can do it.
Let's see. I don't know.
Stop share. Okay, I see.
Yes. Yes, thanks. Thank you very much, and thank you for your lecture. Questions to Renata and comments if you want.
Yes. Thank you very much, Renáta. I wanted to ask 2 questions. So I wanted to ask if you have any specific interpretation for the non-standard burials, the ones that are in the different positions, and also if you see very clear differences in terms of burial furnishings for the graves that are really inside in the church, in the center of the church. I think that the answer is yes, but I'm not sure if I understood correctly. Thank you.
Yes, it's very hard to give some answer at your first question, because there is many interpretation of the ways how can I interpret the population which were buried in between the settlement structures, because we have there also the graves with no furnishing, but we have also the graves with, for example, at the southern supper we have 1 grave with sword, 4 graves with spurs, and 1 female graves was furnished by the earrings made from bronze gilded wire. So it's a expensive jewelry in that time. But we have also majority of these graves have no furnishings, no grave goods, and some of them are buried in a very special body position, like crouched position on left or on the right side, or on a prone position. And yeah, we have unfortunately, we have no data from isotopic analysis of strontium, and so we have very few, and it is not enough to interpret. And we have no data, for example, from archaeogenetic analysis. We have perfect analyzed the cemetery around the second church. It's all individuals are analyzed due to archaeogenetic analysis, and we are preparing the outputs about that. It is very, very interesting. Unfortunately, I cannot give you some informations about it because it's in progress. So it's very hard to interpret it. It could be non-locals, servants or slaves, or this people there which were punched because they're across the rules. Yes, maybe it's also the chronological problem. And
here in the Iberian Peninsula, the proposal for the early medieval types of burials like that, it's that they are slaves, or that they are not part of the standard community, and that but they are, I think they are clearly discarded. The phenomenon is different. They're not placed carefully, so it's another thing. But yeah, those are very different hypotheses. But if maybe you'd like to share, what do you think personally, without the evidence? Just what's your opinion about this?
I think it's an overlapping of all the answers I gave you. So it's
Okay. Yeah.
it could
There's
be
no one
graves.
answer.
Yes,
Yeah.
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 It's
Thank
depend
you.
on the special case I process. Yes, it's like
Okay.
I must have a look on whole context.
Yeah.
And the second question.
Oh, was the ones that are, if you see that the graves that are inside the church are all of them are more furnished or furnished
No.
with better
No,
grave goods? No. Okay.
no.
Okay.
This person was very surely was very important in that community because they were buried inside the church, and we have only few examples from the 9th century about the graves inside in interior the church. But it's in this case I think all individuals were males, every, and one there was 2 adults, one juvenile, and one was infants 1 and one was infant 2.
Okay.
And everybody was male, and one child in anthropological category infants 2 had an iron knife, and one adult have some special bronze cast artifacts, but we cannot interpret it. It's very weird. And it was under the left clavicula, spatula.
So
and
weird.
it's very weird. It's very unusual. And and that's all. And the baby, the little baby, has one silver S-shaped ring.
Okay.
And that's all.
Okay. Thank you. Very interesting.
More questions? Well, I have some, Renáta. Well, the first one is not regarding to the archaeological data, but it's regarding because it's amazing the number of graves that you still have with gold and silver and metal goods in general, although they are not the majority, but even so, it's a lot. And the question is not regarding why, because I can imagine why, but it's do you don't have problems with detectorisms? Because in Iberia, we have this problem. We have the problem of the graves, not only now that are being destroyed by detectorisms or detectorists, but also in the past, robbers of graves were recognized in the past, even in the historical periods, and more or less they destroy this kind of contexts. You don't have this kind of problems?
Yes, we have, but not with the graves or cemeteries, because these cemeteries around the churches were uncovered. I don't know if we are lucky or it's unfortunately, but were uncovered from 50s to 70s. So before the very common using of detector. So they are all old excavation.
Okay. So now I have 2 questions. One is more regarded with with Christianity and the Christianization of the Moravia, the Great Moravia state, because obviously, if you compare with Iberia Peninsula, it's very late. It's very, very late. And the question I have is regarded with who were the people that started to Christianize this area, were the agents, and how they did it. Because you didn't, the question that is related with this is that, do you have in these churches some data regarding to baptized rituals or not, because to be Christian you need to be baptized. And one of the indicators that we have in Iberia is the starting to be shown in the archaeology these baptisteries and these structures to evangelize the pagans. What kind of data do you have, even that is quite light if we compare with Iberia?
Yes. Yes, we have written sources that in 828 in somewhere in Nitra was consecrated the one church of Bishop Adalram for a wife of Pribina, and another one was that in 845 the Moravian princeps were baptized by another bishop from I don't know if it was Regensburg or Salzburg. I think it was Salzburg. And this is historical written sources about the Christianization of great Moravian elites. And we have also these churches and the cemeteries around these churches. And in Pohansko, we have no archaeological evidence of archaeological relics of baptisterium, but we have one case in Mikulčice and one case in Staré Město Uherské Hradiště. So we have at minimum 2 relics of baptisteriums, not in Pohansko, but in another central residential settlements of Great Moravia. So, and in some graves, we found out the pendants in cross shape. Okay. And it may be, it's a proof of Christianity, that the deceased people or the buried people was a Christian, but it could or not could be.
So you find some data that shows that are the elites that are the first to be Christianized, isn't it? Was the elites the first ones?
Yes, the first ones was elites, were elites, yes.
And they were the people that started to evangelize the other dependents and the rest of the communities. Maybe, I don't know.
Our territory was on the edge of the Frankish Empire, so we were how can I say in English, not a central part, but the another one.
The outskirts of the Frankish Empire.
A periphery. This is the right word.
A periphery.
We were on the periphery, and so we have only few historical written sources, and the archaeological artifacts cannot speak. So the interpreting of the way of Christianization, the great Moravian people, it's when is talking about this topic, the historian, he or she could speak in some way, and in another way could speak archaeologist. So it's so many interpretation about that. How was the great Moravian people or the community in Great Moravian Empire state baptized, evangelized, or Christianized?
Okay. Now I will give the floors to someone that wants to do some questions, because I have 2 more questions, but I will give time to other people. If not, I will ask questions more related with archaeological and anthropological matters. One is related with children. although you chose some children graves, but we have always this question: where are the children? Because they are so few in the burial groundyards, are so few if we compare it with
Yeah, we have
with the die of people, of children, that is supposed to occur during these periods.
For example, this excavation of cemetery around the Rotunda was between 2008 to 2012. So it's just quite few years ago. And we did all the time by the hand. We didn't use any technology to remove the soil. And we use the saving, the fill of the grave pits, and so we have we uncovered 152 graves with 154 individuals, and half of them are children. And I think it depends on the methodology of the archaeological research.
Okay, and the children are in individual graves and together, or can be buried with adults?
Some children were buried as normal burial, as in adult way. Some children were put in fill of the older grave of adult person. And we have a group of children. They are lining the perimeter of the apse. It's like a children quarter.
Okay.
Yes, it's many ways how the children were buried, but there is not only one way.
But it's a question of evolution, or is the question of variety in the same period?
This cemetery was function in a very short time, between the last third of 9th century to the first decade of 10th century, maybe 30, maybe 40 years. We have there 2, maximum 3 generations, because we know that because of archaeogenetic analysis. So 2, maximum 3 generations. And what is the interesting, we have fathers, we have children, we have no mothers.
Okay, the moms are absent.
Yes, they were buried somewhere in another place, or we don't know what does it mean.
Yes, it's very strange. It's quite strange. So my last question is regarded with the overlapping of graves. There are some overlapping of graves,
yes,
mainly in the church cemeteries. Do you find it more usual in this kind of areas, in this kind of graveyards that are related with churches, or it's the same when you have the non-related with churches, the other graveyards that you have?
The overlapping is more common in the church graveyards, because they was locus sacer, the area they was used as a last place for deceased of the community. So, and it was very highly managed by clergy, I think. And and this overlapping, if we archaeologically evidence this overlapping, I think it was like a necessary situation, because the individual which was buried there had some rule for burying there. I don't know how if you understand
Yes.
me.
No, we have the same, because
And in the situation in the non-church burial areas, so in the scattered settlement burials, the overlapping of the graves is very rare.
yeah, we
And
have the same.
If exist, so it is because of the deceased or the buried people were not connected with the younger graves.
Okay. Yes, they miss the link,
Yes.
the family link.
Yes.
Yes, that's the question, because we find in Iberia the same. After we have the parochial graveyards, the overlapping of graves is spectacular. We have then it occurs every time, but before, when we have these scattered village graveyards, is not the same. We have reuse of graves, but not the overlapping of graves, and that question is very important, because it's related with identity and family identity, and the link with between people. And although sometimes we don't have the bones, we don't have the people, but only this kind of relation and pattern is very important to realize how this community is organized and how they think in terms of social structure. And that's why I ask you, because it looked me, it was more or less the same, although the context is very, very different, and the chronologies are a little bit different too. So, well, we could be discussing here a lot of time.
And what is typical for the funerary or burial areas in this scattered settlement burial areas is that very often these little burial areas are very strange in the point of view of normal demographic. There are only buried females or children, or one adult male individual, and for example, adult female. And it's not normal demographic structure of population. It's very weird, and it's very common in this kind of settlement burials area. I started to try interpret it, but I cannot find the right answer.
Yes, there is no maybe the right answer from one context is not the same for the other.
And therefore I think that it was very short lasting activity, and it was connected with this economic unit, and this economic unit couldn't be connected by blood. It was like a social connection.
Yes, not ADN links.
Yeah.
The last question, one last question is regarding with, do you think these burials were signalized with a cross, with a wooden cross or something like that, or with a top or something? Because they are very similar, although the goods and the people are different. But when they were in use, do you think they were signalized with names, with wooden cross, with something, with a plaque, something that could be visualized by the community?
I think it was. I think it was very common in that time. I think it was. Yeah. Because the
in
overlapping.
wooden,
Yeah,
in wood.
yeah. Mhm.
Okay, that's why it's not preserved. Yes.
Because if it was from it's like this little earthy mound or earthy pile. It was damaged by the farming in 20 or this century, or the harvesting activities, or if it was something wooden, it's decomposed at all.
It's difficult, to
Yeah.
be preserved. Okay, more questions. So if not,
I like to make a question, please.
yes, Anna Maria, please.
Yes, it's again a little bit. You some moments ago you told that the mothers are missing.
Yeah.
And you talk about mentioned the genetic analysis. Do you have genetic analysis of how many in terms of percentage of the individuals from the place?
The archaeogenetic analysis we have only from the cemetery around the rotunda, so around the second church in Pohansko, and another analysis.
But more or less in proportion. Do you have more half of the individuals, a quarter from all from the sample?
Sorry,
How many people, if
in-
we compare with the total of the people that are buried, how many samples did you analyze the DNA?
From the among 152, it's I think only one or two samples was not able to analyze.
Okay. So it's a very high. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very high.
In terms of you have many children, because you said that you have around half of the samples
Yes.
are children. So, and concerning the other half that are adults, what is more or less the proportion of males and females in your sample? More or less.
In adults,
Yeah, in adults,
individuals.
yes.
I think we have more female individuals, I think.
So you have females, but no mothers. Strange.
Yes. Yes. We have females.
Even
but no
stranger,
mothers.
even stranger.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if I can show you, this cemetery is complete archaeologically published. So if you have an interest, I can send you a link, because it's online.
Okay, thank you.
And in English, Renáta.
Only resume, sorry.
Okay.
Oh.
And the subtitles under the pictures are in English and resume.
Okay, so we can translate in Google.
And I have a very short. I'm sorry, but because there was some periods of your talk that I missed because of professional reasons. So maybe the question I will make, I'm not sure if you have it mentioned during your talk. The individuals that has a typical burials, a position in the burials, what is their demographic profile? Males, females, children, or
in the non-standard,
yes.
Yes, the majority are children. In the second position are female individuals, and in the third, males.
Okay, so you have all groups. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If there is no more questions, I will thank you, Renáta. You are talking more or less 1 hour and a half now. Thank you for that, to give your time to be with us and to discuss with us and present your work with us. It was important. And for everyone, thank you to be with us. This conference, these lectures are going to be on our YouTube channel. So if you want to revisit it or to share the Renáta's presentation, you are welcome. And thank you very much, Renáta. We are still in connection. We are still in contact.
Yes.
Something that you need, please
stay
tell
in
us.
contact. And if anybody of you are interested, I can send you a link of our outputs of our publishing monographies, because they are the newest one from the 2014. Everything is on electronical form, so I can send you a link.
I can, if you allow me, Renáta, I can share your email, email address.
Okay.
Can I?
Yes, you can.
Okay, is now in the chat for those who want to be in contact with Renáta. Okay, thank you very much. Estejam atentos, nós teremos outras conferências, distribuiremos, digamos assim, por todos, avisaremos quando teremos outra conferência do SPA nova, sempre com conversas interessantes e com convidados excelentes. E adeus a todos e obrigada por estarem connosco. Bye bye, Renáta. Thank you very much. Bye bye. Bye bye.
To all you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.